right. Good day, all you devils. Sam here at August 22nd. We're kind of middle of the day here, and as we've had some movement in Bitcoin, it seemed like we might be able to take a look here and see if we can glean anything from this last little reaction we've had in the last several hours. So here's the count. Here's the count as we left it last video that I did. And this count is still potentially in play here. So just to review here from our top, we go A, B, C down here into this pivot down here. This first time we came down to this range, and we put in a W wave there. Here's our X wave. All right, now mildly problematic here is an X wave because typically an X wave would be higher, 786, 887, even 90%. So it feels a little bit like a force fit there with an X there, but from that it looks like there's a possibility here that we go into an A, B, C, D, E, and if we're going to maintain this symmetry, it would appear that the destination here, a target for our E wave, would be down here. Let's call it 5 grand. You can see we've got this little low volume node over here, so that would not be surprising. If we were to come down here, now I've wicked off this prior resistance here as a potential significant point here. So if we were coming down here and we were going to stay with this symmetry, so this trend line here is something, of course, we'd want to be paying attention to. So, that's no question about it. The Elliott count within Bitcoin is a real bitch to get a handle on. So I'm going to go from the 3 hour, let's go down to the 1 hour and see if we can make sense of what's just happened. So if we stick with the idea that we're in the process of completing this D and this E, well, given this price action here, we haven't eliminated any scenarios, but it's drawing into question whether or not this is a valid count as I have it labeled currently. So just a quick review here. So the significance of this, let's see if I can get you back here on the 1 hour. Okay, here. So from this pivot here, so if you're just using our retracement tool, if I go from swing high to swing low, let's get it right on there. All right, so we came right into the golden zone, actually tagged the 65, and then ripped down. All right, so that leaves this unfulfilled target down here at 47.50. Now, as I'll often remind you, right, just because we have a target down here does not mean that we must achieve it. So we can't ignore it, right? It's not an unrealistic target here from this, right? We know an algo is just going to stay short until it gets there, or it's going to reverse. So if we consider that, well, then that would mean coming down here, we'd have to do this in 3 waves. So we'd be looking for an A, B, C. Well, one heck of an A wave, right? So if I zoom in on this, so coming down here, we'll go back to zooming in on it. This would all have to be our A wave here now, given this action here. So I've left this up here because it's really open to interpretation. So coming off of the potential A wave here, it's hard to ignore this 5-wave sequence, right? It's hard to ignore that. But then after that, this just becomes a real cluster. This is difficult to get a handle on. So I think there's a possibility here we have a WXY into the 2. Now, it was looking better here, right? So it could be, as this is technical. So grab my tool here. So from this low here to the proposed wave 1 high, well, all right, no surprise here. Algos have already been paid. So we come to the 50, we get target. So this has already been realized. All right, so now you look at that and you think, oh, okay, well maybe I've got this WXY into a wave 2 here at the 50. That's where we're looking for it. We've gotten the first algo target. Now that's shallow relative to the 1 wave as a 3-wave target. But, it's a possibility here, so we got to be paying attention to the length of the 3 and the length of the 5. But then this big sell-off here, now we've, of course, immediately we would now be looking at, so I'm so sorry. I'm almost over this cough. We'd be looking at this as a diagonal, but it getting a little iffy as a diagonal. So we potentially now we could have 1, 2, 3, deep 4. Now we'd be looking for a relationship, right? So this couldn't help but notice this. So in a diagonal, we'll go from the pivot low or the start of the 1 wave through the 3 wave high, and look for a relationship for the 4. And what have we done? We've come right to the 50. So I can't quite disqualify this. I get a little ABC here. So we have this, it's a little problematic in that you have an impulse here and then we get an ABC or WXY in this case. So it means you'd have to relabel this. So we'd have to we'd have to turn this into an ABC, which I suppose we can do here. So you'd have to label it this way. So this would be an ABC into an A. Here'd be the B. We'd be going up for the C, and you'd have to work this as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 potentially, or it could just be ABC. Little tricky there. So that's a contender here is a 1, 2. Now this will be the key. Well, note here. So interesting from this pivot. Let me get it right on there. This Y waves ends up in the golden zone. Interesting. But there's a candidate here for a 2 wave. Well, that means we're going to have to blow pretty hard up here to go after that 5. Well, so what's in the backdrop? Of course, tomorrow we have an ETF decision that. I'm trying to guess what the outcome is going to be. Odds would favor that it won't get approved, but you never know until you get the data. So this is it still is a contender here as a diagonal, right? That's the symmetry is not great given the length of the 2 relative to what would be the 4. So I don't love that. So you have to start questioning your premise here that. Could this be some sort of a motive wave? Well, we're going to need a big move up here, and then we're going to have to allow for this very poor symmetry between the 2 and the 4. Now, 4 may not be done yet. We could just be the A wave. We can't declare the 4 in, but it's certainly interesting that where we've come, right? So potentially now that's just an algo front running the 50. We don't know for sure yet. If this starts to come down here, we take out this pivot. Now this count is invalidated, and then it looks much more corrective. So again, when you're in that situation where it just doesn't look right, and while you can't invalidate the count, you just don't like the look of it. Of course, my suggestion is always just strip the chart bare and just start over. So that's what I did here. And so I show you this as an alternate in the context of just trying to simplify it. So I'm gonna push this off for a second here. So considering this, so often what I will ask myself is, what is the simplest possible explanation for what we're seeing? Because once you start going into double combinations and you're accommodating inconsistencies or low probabilities to make a count fit, you got to step back from it and say, wait a minute. What's the simplest possible thing that I could identify? If I just look for 5s and 3s, what's the most obvious count? Well, let's go back all the way to our top here. So throughout the entire correction, I have been looking at this, and I think many have been looking at this as an ABC for a couple of reasons. One, from this pivot, if we take the draw here, go down, get it right there. Well, we're right in the location where you'd anticipate a 2 or a B. So this had been considered as an A, B, C into the B, and then you could get a clean 5 coming down here, and we still can, right? So that's the way I've been looking at it. But then if you have to just rethink it, so what's a simpler solution? Well, I certainly could have a 5 wave. I could have a motive wave coming down here with a diagonal, right? So the 4 would overlap the 1. So this has to get relabeled here. So and it's technical. So if we're in a diagonal, we could look for, as I've shown you many times, we'd look for a relationship between the start of the 1 wave through the pivot of the 3rd wave. Well, we come to 38. We do get algo target here. That's one to consider. This is the other one that I think I've shown many times. That here's a little bit better here, where we come potentially now, if we just take the length of the 2 to the 4, we come shy of the 50, get target down here. Nothing is absolutely perfect, but let's just consider for the sake of this discussion here, that what we have is that we count this as 5 coming down. Well, that gives me an A wave, right? Then I can go A, B, C into a B wave. Well, here's where I think there's a simpler version that is just as reasonable as calling this an A, B, C, D, E. Well, why can't that be 5? And no reason it can't. So in the context of trying to simplify, if I've got 5 down into my A, B, C into my B, well, now it's a little bit shallow here. So if I think about that in terms of where I might be looking for a B wave, you know, ideally you're closer to the 50, but we don't disqualify here the fact that we're between the 38 and the 50. You know, it's lower probability, lower percentage of B waves will be that shallow, yet it certainly doesn't invalidate the count. Well, what if coming from that B that all we've done here is just put in a 5-wave structure, right? Wouldn't that be the simpler explanation? I can get 5 down into my 1. Yeah, this has always been difficult to try and get this as corrective, whether it's A, B, and you're trying to squeeze an A, B, C into this. If you go down to the lower time frame, you can get 5 in that C, but it's a very short C, of course, relative to the A. So you feel a little bit like, kind of wonder, you're just questioning yourself. Am I force fitting? It's much easier to see it as a 5, but you can get 5 into the A, and then we get this little, is that a truncated C into the B there? It's not a great fit, but it wouldn't be the craziest thing I'd ever seen. So it's a contender here as a 2. So if we look here, if this were the start of our A wave here, and we had completed this the 1 wave here. Well, here we've looked at this before. So we go 6-8 to the tick. Now this got just a couple of ticks through the 65, but then the big scream we roll over, and then as I've shown this before, we do it yet again. So we go golden zone here. Yeah, we go through by a tick, but then we go golden zone yet again here. So if I can grab this here, and as I've shown this, so if that's so we go golden zone. So do it twice in a row, so you can see it here. So if this is the start of it, so we go golden zone. We get it once here. Once here, yeah, I know it's a tick through. All right, so we get it once there, then yet again, we get the exact same thing there. So those are tells to me that those are significant pivots relative to the correction. So 2 golden zones in a row, which, well, of course, that's giving us this hot box down here of multiple targets down here. As a contender for finishing this, as we have now, that's going to be a magnet as algos will be defending that. So but then I look at it and say, okay, well, 1, 2, 3, 4. If we were going to finish here, well, 1 would be longer than 3, if I'm not mistaken. But 5 could be the short. Pardon me. 5 would, per this count, even if we hit those targets, will be shorter than 3. So as I will often tell you, third doesn't have to be the longest, just can't be the shortest. So if as I recall, if we look here, if this is the start of this 5-wave structure, well, you can see here the third is not here's 100%. So it's not as long as the first, but if we're going to pivot down here, we're going to look for the pivot either in conjunction with this trend line or those algo targets. This would still play as 5 would be shorter than 3. So we'd have the extension in the 1 wave. So that's a reasonable count, I think, and it simplifies. So A, B, putting in the C. So we've just done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sometimes the most obvious, kind of staring you in the face. I don't know why I hadn't looked at that before, but it was the first time when I stripped it bare and said, well, wait a minute. Why couldn't that be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Well, we got to dig into the hard right edge here and see if we can make sense of it coming down. Well, if this were a 4, right? So here we are going into the golden zone, right? For the 4. So let's clear this up a little bit. So this would have to be A, B, C. Well, that plays. Well, coming down here, this is where it's gotten very difficult. So given this reaction here, well, a couple things to consider. One, if I have this labeled correctly, if this is 1, 2, now I've got this as this sort of a difficult correction here. I still think this is an expanded B wave here. But if I've got this right, if that's my 2, and here's my 3, right here. Well, what have we done? We've gone to the 38 to the tick. So this, when we dig into this count, I think this is a reasonable contender here for our 4th wave relative to this 1, 2. So we'd be 1, 2, 3, A, expanded B wave. Then we're going A, B, C. And we'll break that down so you can see how I come up with that. So 1, 2, big 3. Well, it gets problematic down here. So this takes a little nuanced. So let's open it up a little bit more. So here it gets, well, let me start here. So we go 1, 2. Now, it's from this pivot. Let me change this. So let me get this here. So this is where it gets tricky. So from this pivot, I can get a clear 5 waves down, right? So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 into what I propose is a 1 wave. So 1, 2, 3, yes, that's a shallow 4. I recognize that. But this 5 waves can't be ignored. So so what does it leave, right? So if we're going to allow for this as the 3, 4, well, then we're getting an extension in the 5th, right? So 3rd, yet again, would not be the longest. It would be longer than 1. The longest would be 5. But, if I look at this and I think, okay, if that's 1 and that's 2, well, so here's the high probability zone for the 3. So it's possible you could do it that way. You could do 3, 4, but I think we are more likely here because from here, I don't like to count as much. From this pivot here as a 4, I like that I can get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that gives me a 1 off of the 4. Then I get a clear 2. Here's the impulse of 3 ABC into my 4. And as I recall, that 2 was technical. Right, so I think as I've shown this in prior videos, so if we go from the 2 to the 3 low, right, so here's our 4, so there's a perfect algo pull, right, I showed this in the last video. From the 50, they get their target here. Now look at the reaction. Right, so that's the tell. We know it's algo participation here because they've hit target, and then look at the reaction. So coming from this pivot, I can't ignore that 5. I know that's finishing something. So you kind of have to work backwards and say, well, if that's finishing, given this, that's impulsive, that's more likely, and because I can get 5 down into this low, that's more likely my 3 given now what I'm seeing over here. So that means I've got to go 1, 2, 3. Now here's where it gets very tricky, right? So because you can't finish we can't finish with a 3 here. There's no way to make this work. The diagonal doesn't work. It's very difficult to get anything that works here. So the way I have it labeled, let me go down. I'm going to go down to the 30-minute here. I think that'll be easier to see. Let me open this up and we'll bring this here. So I've got us going ABC into an A wave. Well, this ABC here, I cannot work around. There's no workaround. I can't force fit it. I just feel like I'm force fitting it there if I do anything other than label that as a 3-wave structure. So if I've got that as an ABC, what does that leave me? Well, that leaves me an expanded flat. So this is where I've got my 3 ending, as in 3, 4, 5. ABC into an A wave, ABC into a B wave, but then this, now I'm proposing that this is a good candidate here for our C wave here. So that correction would be like this. It would be A, B, C. All right, do you see that? So a couple of things we can do. Well, so of course, first we're going to look for any relationship between those 3 swings. So if I take the length of my A wave here, and my machine's a little slow today, probably needs to be rebooted. Okay, well, so if that's my B wave here, we're a little shy of 200% the length of the A. There's a few other things I can measure looking for that. I might additionally, if I'm looking at this in terms of the retracement, right? So we know that's at the 38 relative to the 2. Well, if that's a B, can I get a good solid C wave here? Well, it's very tricky. So I've got 5 up here, so you can see this. So if I label it here, I can get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so that's a real contender for an A wave. Yeah, come here. A wave, 5 up. Now, this looks to me like I go A down, A, B, C into a B, and then I finish here with this A, B, and then I barely can squeeze out a C there, but it's there if you've got to really dig for it. I had to go down to the 5-minute to get it. So I can go A, B, C into a B wave relative to this A wave here. So now I've got A, B, C. Well, let's look and see if that's technical. So if I take the start of my A to where I propose I'm finding my B wave, well, what have we done here? We've just gone right to the 50. So yet again, algos get paid again. All right, so here we have them going from the 50, and they've got to and through this target, but then look at the reaction here. Now, so this was, I don't know what's causing that. I haven't been able to dig into any news, although we do know that looming in the background that we have this ETF decision and we have some extremes in terms of Bitcoin shorts, and it's just there's it's a nervous market here. So you're seeing spike up, spike down, a little bit of gamesmanship being played here in Bitcoin. But for us, trying to stay out of that and trying to guess what the next swing on the 5-minute chart is, can we get a long-term count that works here? Well, I'm kind of sticking with this until I see something more substantial, because this certainly doesn't look impulsive. Does it? It's a lot of chop back and forth. It looks more like I've got some sort of a three-wave structure here. And given that I've got an algo target, granted we've gone through it, given this reaction, well, let's think about it. So if we were going to come down here, well, here's my trend line. If I were going to come down here and finish as a fifth, so I'd have A, B, C into my 4 here, and I'm looking to finish down here somewhere around this trend line to finish this. Well, let's see what I'll be. I guess that would be our C there. So we'd be A, B, C into the 4. Coming down, now we're looking to finish it in 5. So we'd be looking at, so maybe that's the one going in 3, 4, 5. All right, again, I'm just hypothetical here. We don't know what that looks like, but it's possible that's what we're looking for. Probably more depth in the 2. So this has been interesting here. So this wouldn't be surprising. So this whole region up across here, where we've run into this stiff resistance repeatedly, hit it, broke it, but we didn't stay beyond it. So it wouldn't be surprising to me at all. Again, I don't know if we're stopped here, but we were to come back here. So then you think, well, where is that relative to where I might be looking for a 2-wave? And we're right at the 50 here, right? So this would take us to the negative 1618. Again, it could be a diagonal. We don't know. It's just hypothetical. But that would put us finishing down here right on this trend line here. So there's some, again, I'm leaning into, what is this? That doesn't look impulsive. It's really a stretch to try and go 1, 2, 3. So you could go, maybe you can go 1, 2, 1, 2. But this is going to need, I would say this: if that ETF gets approved, that this count could change in a hurry. If we're going to rocket up here like this off of bullish news, well, then we got to reevaluate. But right now, and my view, which is, take it for what it's worth, it's essentially worthless. But if I were betting on this, I wouldn't be betting on that ETF getting approved. Just don't think they're quite there yet. But eventually, one of them is going to get approved, and then we're going to see some reaction. But technically, as technicians, I'd prefer to see us down. I'd prefer to be looking to buy Bitcoin down here around 5,600, or call it 5,600, in that range. That, I think, completes the broader count. So if I pull back out, let's go. Maybe I can do it in a 2-hour. If we pull back out from this as a 4, and where we might be looking for this 5, that's. Well, let me see if I can get this out here. We know we've got those algo targets here. So obviously, here's the algo target. We looked at those 2 targets here. But if we think about this in terms of how it would relate to, let me zoom this back out, the length of the 5th relative to the length of the 1. So commonly, we'll look for a relationship there. If this is playing as a 1, 2, if I have the count correctly here, if this is playing as a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, well, we'd want to look for some relationship between the length of the 1 relative to the 5. So if I take it from what I'm proposing is the start of the 1 wave through what I'm proposing here is our pivot, and we go from there's 2 ways to look at it. So we could look at from the 2, and then we could work from the 4. Well, if I work from the 4, well, look what happens here. Now I've got the 618, which is not uncommon. Now remember, we're in a diagonal, right? So I've got a couple of things to check here. So because of the 4 so severely overlapping the 1, this is a common target. Is the 618 the length of the 1? Now remember, in conjunction with that, we have this, right? So here's the golden zone. Now look what happens. 618 lines up on top of that, and in conjunction with that, I've got this, where we get this hot box here. So I've got a really solid target down here where I've got strong confluence. I would be finishing this 5-wave structure, which ultimately would be a C wave. Now this would mean we'd be allowing for some overthrow here in relative to the trend line, right? So if we if we were to come down here, well, so one of two things are happening. If we hold here on the 3 pivot, then we've got an overthrow, right? We're not uncommon when you're for an algo pushing for a target, or in a fifth wave, you might see that kind of extreme before start heading up. So that wouldn't surprise me too terribly much. So this trend line is worth noting, but I wouldn't base a trade decision off of it. If we're going to come down here, and all of this is going to complete down here at these targets, well, then it's pretty much tease you up here. That in my view, that would be a significant pivot. That's one to load up on, right? So if I get that opportunity, if I can buy Bitcoin down here, yeah, I'm going to put some Bitcoin to work there, or put some dollars to work is the way I should phrase that for new Bitcoin longs, because I think that this whole thing would be completing just it'd be absolutely perfect. So there's two views on it. Here this still. It's, still possible here that we're just putting in the 4 and that we've got another push up here. So that we'd be changing our thinking if this is going to go up and do this, right? So then now we'd have a real candidate here as a diagonal for a leading diagonal potentially in a one wave. I think that is less likely. But, shit, right? I'm wrong all the time. So it's possible here, but I think less likely. So this is the count I'm kind of deferring to. I like it because it's simpler. I like the double golden zone. I like the confluence down here for these targets. Again, this can be invalidated quickly if we get an impulsive move here off of this low. Then we'll have to reconsider what exactly has happened down here. It's very hard to get this to finish down here with your Elliott hat on. Very, very hard to get this, to somehow get this 3 waves finishing. The diagonal doesn't work, right? So because in this case, so if you were looking at, let's think, if you were thinking, okay, there's 1, that's 2, maybe that's 3, 4, 5, doesn't work, all right? 3 is the shortest. Believe me, that was the first thing I looked at. So I can't get this to work. So this ABC, I think, is the tell, which is why I lean into the expanded flat there. So again, going A, B, C, A, B, and then potentially now the C is in over here. So we'll see. So again, when it's that unclear, it's not that it's not tradable. I mean, certainly you could be trading off of this 50 for that algo target, but I certainly would be conservative in the amount of risk that I was putting myself, allowing myself to be exposed to. So I'd be conservative with where I'd be exiting the market. Well, so here, clearly, if we invalidate this pivot, then the bull count is invalidated here, but it's tradable here. Right, shit, what do we got there? That's nothing wrong with that trade. So if I look here, if you're a buyer in this range here, we got an algo target up here, nothing wrong with that trade. So if you went to the absolute, I know I'm wrong, that's 3.87 to 1 on the assumption you got to fill maybe a revisit here, a little pullback to the 50. I'm trying to get it. Maybe it's too late to chase it there. If we put it right there, now you'd be at still. Let's bring this down here. You'd front run the target. There's 3.2 to 1. That's a little more risk than I would want to give it myself, because I don't like this as a 3, 4, 5. So again, just as I show this kind of frequently, look at the 2 relative to the 4. That's what you'd be saying. Right? The symmetry just doesn't look. Not that I haven't seen something like that happen before. I'm just saying that gives me pause to the bull count, because again, back to over here, I just don't think we're done going down yet. I think we're close, but I don't think we're done. Pull that off. I just don't think we're done yet. So this suspect as a 4, as an algo pull, nothing wrong with it. Right? Why not take that trade? Right? You put your stop right below the 50. Right, on the assumption that this is already being algo driven, that we're getting a little pump there. So we're getting a little push off of this. That would be the front run. Again, it's not a trade I would take, right? And I'm always looking for a buy in Bitcoin. I don't like it enough to take it myself, right? Doesn't mean that it couldn't happen, but it's not strong enough for me to take a trade there. It's my view. So that's kind of a look at it. Not an easy count in Bitcoin, no question about it. I think with a little bit more information, this is going to start to clarify, and we'll get a better feel for what's likely happening down here. But this whole thing, very difficult to trade. Very hard to get a count. Look how choppy that is, up, down. So scalpers, probably doing all right. Swing traders, What a mess, right? It's just a mess. So when in doubt, stay out. Can't hurt yourself doing that. Sure, there's some opportunity cost, but maybe that the cost is keeping yourself out of a choppy market that's lacking direction. And if you were not in the market, taking it ahead of that ETF decision, I'd think twice about that. All right, guys. Well, that's there's 30 minutes. I probably rambled on long enough there. That's about all the commentary I can add there. I'll be back with one more today. We did that. We put it up to a vote. So interesting times. See where we are on Friday. All right, back to you then.